Well, thank you very much for joining me for the next 20 to 30 minutes. My name is Darren Lutchner, and I'm going to talk to you. If you like a question, please post it in the Q&A chat at any stage, and my wonderful moderator, Beck, will take note. The question I see that's been asked a lot so far in the other talks has been, is this session recorded? And the answer is yes, it's going to be recorded and will be available sometime after this event. At the end of my talk, I'll have time to respond to those questions, any of those questions that you post. So stick with me. So before we get started, we've got a code of conduct throughout all our talks, and basically it means that we all have to be nice to traditional owners. We acknowledge that the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, we pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities. So while together, let me tell you a little about me and my experience. As I said, Darren Lutchner, and I'm Melbourne born and bred. I'm married up with 2 grown-up kids, and I also have King Charles Cavalier, who is out walking at the moment, so he doesn't bark during my talk here. I'm also a science fiction junkie, all the famous ones and some of the not so famous ones. I've been in technology so long that DOS used to be an operating system and not what it is now, a denial of service. I've spent many years implementing Microsoft Dynamics NAV, or now it's called Business Central, and Microsoft 365 for Business. And this year I started consulting with small to medium businesses in Microsoft 365 implementations. So people always ask me what I mean by small to medium businesses. I've tended to say a small business is at least 5 people and a medium business is up to 300 people. But according to the OECD in Europe, medium businesses are considered up to 250 employees, while in the USA it's up to 500 people. And small businesses are lower than 50 employees. And there's micro businesses that are less than 10. So really, there's no hard definition of the size of what these size of businesses are. As I was creating this presentation, Microsoft rebranded Office 365 for Business and is now calling it Microsoft 365 for Business. And also don't be confused with another product range called Microsoft Dynamics 365. The Dynamics 365 are a great suite of business applications that seamlessly integrate well with Microsoft 365. So these are the basic suite of Microsoft 365 applications. All your classic favorite applications are there, but now there's also some really powerful new ones. And some of my favorites are the following. So you probably know that Teams natively manages chat, video conferencing, files management, and calendar. I see it as much more than that. It's also a user's one-stop shop for them to do their job by focusing on their responsibilities within their team or department. That's because it integrates so well with many Microsoft and non-Microsoft applications. A good old SharePoint is that in the last couple of years has had a major redesign and is now easier to use than ever before. It's great for managing shared files, but my favorite feature in SharePoint is creating a SharePoint list. And I also like Power Automate. It's an online workflow service that automates actions across the most common apps and services. Watching a good workflow gets me a little giddy. A little bit of a brag now. I once set up a flow to read an SQL Server database log table, and every time a critical type record was created, it sent an email warning to the technical team and to myself. When I saw the email, I pestered the technical team with, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" Of course, there are many additional fully integrated add-ins and other services that can also be used with Power Automate. So let's define what a Microsoft 365, what I consider Microsoft 365 implementation is. When I first approach a customer and ask, have they implemented Microsoft 365, they usually tell me the following. Oh, yes, our third-party IT support company took our on-site network files and moved them to OneDrive or Teams, and now we can't find them or share them like we used to. Or the other one is, yes, IT moved our on-site SharePoint to the cloud, and now all our links are broken. Or one of my favorites is, yes, we have, and now I keep getting this Teams program pop-up every day. I don't know what it is, and it just gets in the way. So as I mentioned, Microsoft Office was traditionally a base set of standalone applications, which was Word, Excel, Outlook, etc. So implementing Microsoft 365 includes solutions for managing teamwork and communication, process automation, file storage sharing, improving security, multiple devices, and very much more. So if you like, implementation is not about just installing the software. It's re-engineering your people, your processes, and the business systems to improve your business practices. Microsoft 365 is a suite of very powerful and flexible solutions. So there's not one single way to implement. You can always use the standard implementation approaches such as waterfall or agile or variations of these. But I want to focus on two styles of implementation. One is fake it till you make it, well, you might be able to do that. Or the other one is plan, prioritize, design, and deploy. So with fake it till you make it, it is where the organization has had Microsoft 365 installed, but there are no formal plans to utilize it to improve the business. So in other words, it's a business as usual and will be rolled out informally if people feel they need to. This implementation is usually mostly done by word of mouth. For instance, someone may talk with those individuals that have started using Teams. When it comes to training, some people may learn from the internet videos or MSL help online. The benefit of this type of implementation is you might get some quick, easy wins, and this is a cheap way of implementing. For instance, you may pick up on chat and some other features easily. However, because no one has taken the time to understand what features are available, they're not using the power of Microsoft 365, and therefore there is very little immediate value add. My family loves Lego Masters on TV at the moment. As a person who strives for successful implementations, I secretly like it when the contestants' models blow up or smash on the floor. Although I do feel sorry for the contestants when that happens. But truthfully, I absolutely love seeing the final builds. So as a little sample, I asked my son the other day to build a car with Lego in 3 minutes with no other instructions or prep time. And here's how he went. Click there. You can see that the result is a vehicle that's a mess of brick types and colours. I see Lego build very much the same as Microsoft 365 implementations. You can just start building with no planning. The key to success for both scenarios is the same. So you've got to scope out what you can achieve within the time and budget you have and don't veer from it. You can prepare an approach and design to implementing before you start the build. In Lego Masters, sometimes the brickman comes up to a contestant during the build and says, "Are you sure you should have approached the build that way?" In other words, maybe the contestants focused on aesthetics and spent little time on the structural design. This can be the same with building Microsoft 365. Perhaps your planning is focused on storing and sharing documents in the cloud, but it runs a mess of files because you've not set up the rules of name conventions and location storage. Or communication practice. The other thing is test before you release. In Lego Masters, bricks fall off in the build if the build is completed in the last few seconds and a test or final review is not done. Now, I want to show you the sort of small Microsoft 365 implementation demo using the fake it till you make it style and what are the outcomes. Another show I'm watching during isolation, I'm sure a lot of people are watching TV during the isolation, is Billions. So in this demo, I'm going to use Axe Capital and some Billions cast as users. Axe Capital have recently upgraded their systems from internal network-based systems to Microsoft 365 Business Cloud storage. I want to focus on a key set of files they store to manage with their dealings with the Attorney General. Before Axe Capital upgraded, documents were stored in multiple places. So one of the characters, Bobby Axelrod, had it on his local PC. Another character, Wags, had some and different documents on their PC. And there was a shared network drive with, again, same and different network documents stored there. Now, when they upgraded to Microsoft 365, they just replicated the document management setup as they had before. So now Bobby Axelrod has individual PC, but now he's added that to his OneDrive, and Wag's the same, also on their PC and added OneDrive. And Teams now replaces the shared drive they had before. In this case, they may still have some issues and have added no value to the organization. So they've still got duplicate files. There's no single stored location or version control for those documents, and they're probably still sharing those documents via email attachments. And I'm sure they've got security issues because documents are flying all over the place and they haven't got a clue where they are. So some of my suggested solutions would include, unless you've got documents that are your own personal ones, then store and manage them in Teams. And you can sync them locally if you want to. Remove copies of the individual PC OneDrives. There needs to be one place you can keep them all. And make sure that security is set adequately so those pesky day traders can't see them. For those wonderful people of you who have stuck around, we've got a competition with some wonderful prizes. I'll give you a few moments here to take a screenshot of this QR code, which will take you to the competition. And it also gives me a second to have a drink. So everyone take a drink as well. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, let's move on. Now, I want to talk about the other approach, which is to plan, prioritize, design, and deploy what you're implementing. Of course, this is the option I prefer. As per my last slides, a couple of don'ts here. So don't start rolling out the solution first. We now have Teams and let's start using it. That's what people think. Don't try to make your existing work practices fit into the new solution by trying to put the old square peg in the round hole. Instead, start by learning what Microsoft 365 can offer. Have a think about the sort of improved work practices you could achieve. There's plenty of online resources out there to help you out. Once you've got a bit of a grasp of the solutions, then you should plan and prioritize. So brainstorm a list of current processes and practices that could benefit from the implementation. For instance, as per my Axe Capital example, you may identify that you want to improve collaboration of the Attorney General documents. You may also want to add communication practices within the team that work with the Attorney General. You should prioritize in order which are important and can be most beneficial. You also might want to group processes up by business area or logically making sense. And identify some easy, quick wins. These will give some ongoing confidence in the business and teams. If the list is quite sizable, you might want to implement this section in phases or sprints. Once you have a scope in place, you should build a schedule of tasks to implement. Make sure within that schedule you have access to the people you need. Then you can start drilling down on design and operational rules. This design would include naming conventions for teams, files, and communication in general, documenting new processes and procedures for the new system, configuring the solution, for instance, creating teams and channels, migration of documents to appropriate sites, identifying and training a system administrator. They'll have to manage your users and set up your rules and security. Building apps and any integration you might need. Building the management of data. You may have to update usernames, files, internal address books. Prepare a training plan and documents and train users. Creating a user acceptance test plan based on the design and have the user carry out the testing. It's important that they understand and are comfortable to deploy to production, deploy to live and ongoing support. If you have future phases or sprints, then you may want to plan them and implement those next. So after my son built the last Lego car, I gave him some instructions, this time to build a red car with a driver that aesthetically looks good. This is what he came up with this time. Just press the play and it should work. Here we go. So you can now see the improvement even with a little bit of planning. and he's a happy little driver. I was recently asked by a client to come up with a solution in Microsoft Teams that allowed them to manage mini project schedules. At that stage, they didn't give me many solid requirements. So to help identify the approach we should take, I created a proof of concept. The objective of this proof of concept was to explain the different potential solutions within the Microsoft 365 suite and show the strengths and weaknesses of each. Now I'll give you a quick overview of this proof of concept. I've created a Microsoft team. Within the team, I created a number of channels with 4 different project solutions, which I want to show you, and I'll go through them one by one. The first type is a straightforward Excel spreadsheet. The file is stored in the channel's file system. Whilst here, I have created a tab that opens a standard Excel template. Simple and easy to set up and use. Great. You can even share this spreadsheet, and if required, others can update. However, if you want to get a bit fancy with functionality like assigning and tracking tasks and managing resources, it's quite difficult with just a spreadsheet. And so this approach is probably good for very small projects, probably with 1 or 2 people. Another option is to use Microsoft Planner. Again, this one is good for some simple projects, and you can even drive some automated processes using Power Automate, like sending an email as a task that's assigned to someone. However, it's also a little limited. If you like to run projects using the Kanban methodology, then using Trello may be the way to go. Of course, Trello also integrates well with Teams. Here's a style using SharePoint lists. I like this because SharePoint lists are very flexible in the information you can use. For instance, I've added gates and RAG status. Using Power Automate is great at updating fields or sending email follow-ups. Exporting to Excel and reporting is also an advantage. But the issue here is if your project has several levels for tasks, then it's difficult to manage in SharePoint. I'm no SharePoint expert, and I'm sure there's a good solution for project management, but you need to know what you want before you dive in. And my final option is using Power Apps connected to an Azure SQL Server backend. This option is very flexible. However, it needs some technical knowledge and it can take some time to implement. This is a good option if you have an existing SQL Server solution and you may want to integrate it with. And of course, there are many other options to use, and many integrate into Microsoft 365 nicely. If a business dives straight into any available option without knowing how it meets their requirements, both for now and the future, it could cost them dearly. So planning is essential. So in summary, implementing Microsoft 365 for business involves the following. So identifying what you consider small to medium businesses are, deciding what the approach will be. Would you just dive straight in and take the risk of seeing where this leads? Or would you take a more considered approach to get the most benefits from the solution? Whatever approach you take, I hope your journey is a good and fun one and are successful in improving your business practices. So look, thank you very much for making it to the end of the presentation. I'd really like to thank our sponsors and our wonderful organisers, Beck Jackson, Megan Strand and Lorian Strand. They've done a great job. So from there, I'm going to say, here are my contact details. If you want to discuss more with me, happy to chat with you. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
We do have a couple of questions, Darren. I will leave your details up for a moment just so that people can grab them if they need to.
Sure.
So if I switch over to published, the first one is, what is your advice for small businesses around Teams versus Yammer?
Oh, that's a good question. Now, I don't think it's a versus. They're 2 separate products for 2 different requirements. Yammer is used more as a company-wide. I haven't used Yammer a lot, but it's sort of like Facebook, but it integrates within Teams. It's part of the solution that Teams uses, and I think I wouldn't say it's versus, but they work really well. If you're a Yammer site that is able to use Yammer, I would go for it. I think it's a very powerful tool insofar as communication and setting up communication with your teams. You may want to control it versus the chat within Teams, because there's various options of what you use. But again, it goes back to planning and training the users of where they should use what.
Good one. I'm gonna send you live now so that people can see your lovely face.
Oh, thank you.
While you're talking, and we can put your contact details back up in a little bit later, because we've got lots of time for questions if people have more. So
Yep.
We do have another one in the chat here. Any recommendations on tools for common migration scenarios, such as from moving from Google G Suite to Microsoft 365 or on-prem to Microsoft 365? That's a chunky one for you.
Moving from Google to Microsoft, changing sides. I don't know of any particular tools out there that migrate directly from one to the other. I think there might be some that people have created out there, some third-party tools. I'd have to check on that. But again, it's when you're moving files or data, it's also, as I said before in my talk, it's a matter of knowing what the solution is. So if you're going to move files from Google Docs to Teams, you first of all need to make sure that the files are compatible. Are there any macros or anything in there that that works within make sure it works within Microsoft, and templates. You may need to rebuild some of those if they're purely in Docs, if they don't convert correctly. You might also want to make sure that they're set up in the right way. So as I said before, if you're making Teams, your folders within Google Docs or the way it's set out in Docs may not suit the way you set up for Teams. I have another client who did a similar sort of thing and brought everything across to Teams, and then they made a whole lot of Teams based on how their documents were set up. But that may not be the way they work or the way you work as a process. So you've got to think about it as business process and what docs go to where. So as far as your question about tools, I'm not sure, but if you do find a tool, be careful about how you use it. You migrate as far as business practices are concerned. That's a tricky one as well, and there's no tool for that. That's you basically just working out from your business what's the best way to migrate.
I knew that was a chunky question. The next one we've got lined up for you here is, do you recommend any particular training resources?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important. Last year, as I said, I focused a lot on Dynamics, but I didn't have a lot of knowledge of Microsoft 365. And it's only been this year that I really dived into that. I think late last year, early this year, I got my fundamental certificate from Microsoft. So Microsoft have some really good certifications. There's a certification for Microsoft. I was just trying to think of the number. It's MC 900 or something. And the way is to go into Microsoft's website. They have some great documentation. They've got some good training courses. There are some third-party trainers out there that'll teach you online as well how to use some of this stuff. There's a huge amount online of how to learn. So pick the area you want. There with Microsoft 365, there's as I showed you, there are so many applications. You need to define which ones you want to focus on and what area. There are many technical ones out there as well if you're into that as well. But contact me and we can talk about where I found mine if you want.
Nice. I'll pop your contact details back up towards the end of the session for everyone in case they haven't got them already. Just more of a comment, FYI from an earlier session, I liked the Yammer equals water cooler reference. Did you have any thoughts on that comment?
I don't know what that reference is for water cooler.
I'm not sure what session it's referring to, but I know like actually in our organisation, we have a bit of a water cooler Yammer group and also a water cooler chat with one of my teams. So the concepts around the Yammer is the digital equivalent of the office water cooler, the place you hang around to get that ephemeral information.
Look, I think that's all right. We're all isolating at home, and that's probably a really good thing. But when we're in the office, there's nothing better than face to face if possible. if you're doing that. If you're able to see people in an office, don't let technology get in the way of a good, chat over the TV show last night or whatever. You need that contact. So just mix it carefully. Don't hide behind a screen the whole time.
Another question from Manib. I hope I've pronounced that reasonably correctly.
Wow, there's a lot of questions. That's great.
Do you recommend fake IT approach for enterprise deployments? I'm not sure I know.
Ooh.
And do you know what that question means?
Yeah. So what
Please explain it to me, because I don't know. Explain it for the audience and me.
I just said I said fake it till you make it. That was my.
Oh, sorry. I totally took notes on that and didn't even connect on that fake IT approach. What's that? That's fancy.
That's what you're talking about. So, and enterprise is a whole different ball game. And no, the answer is no. Of course not. I've been working for enterprises before, and look, you can do it if you've got a team that's to the side and not with anything else. It's really to the side of the enterprise and has its own rules and can do its own things. Sure, maybe you can get away with it, but if you're talking about a large institution or a large company, then you're going to get stopped pretty quickly, and you'll get yourself in huge trouble as far as people not knowing what you're up to and what you're trying to do. So no, I think my planning is even more so important there, and a strong methodology is really important, and communication is just more than ever with those sort of things. So the answer is no.
Nice. Still going with the questions. We have Michael Harrison has asked, how easy is it to scale a 365 implementation across multiple work sites and countries?
Great question. They're all great questions, mind you. Yeah, look, it shouldn't be difficult because it's all cloud-based, and unless you've got some areas that are on premise, if it's all cloud or mostly all cloud-based, then I think it's a bit easier. That goes down to how you work with your other sites. If you currently have a good communication with them, weekly meetings, or able to communicate them well and follow the same practices and processes, that's right. But if you've got sites that are doing the same thing but differently, so you might have a site that's a warehouse or a finance or a different section that does things differently, you probably want to get them involved together with yourselves and get those processes the same, because if you've still got them differently, you're going to fight against each other. So for instance, you may not want a team, 3 different teams in one department, but they're different sites. And if you need to cross-pollinate across different sites, you really want to integrate it better than that. So it just depends on the organization about how complex those processes are and how well you work together. And I think, again, what I said before, don't dive into the solution. You need to sort some of those business rules out before you consider the technology, and you all need to be on board on the same solution. If you've got a bit of political pushback on different areas, that can be challenging too. If one area doesn't want to join in that particular way and stuck in the way they're doing, you're going to find it difficult. You absolutely need to get the management, the senior management or owners or whoever they are, to give full approval of the way you're going forward, and need to keep them involved. As I said, it's all about communication at all the different levels, and everybody needs to be swimming down the river the same way.
Now, I've done a call for last questions because we're nearly at time, and we've got one more in the thread. Should small to medium businesses try to manage in-house or work with a specialist?
Oh, I love that question. That's great. I've seen both. Now, as being a consultant for most of my life, I think a specialist to some extent is important. And I think the reason I say that is because unless you've got experience, 2 things: you need experience in it, and if you've got that in-house, great. You also need the availability. So everybody in the business is probably doing their day-to-day job really a lot, really hard and really fast, and do that while you're trying to do an implementation, it's just never going to get off the ground properly and be finished because people are too busy. You need to plan this as a project and have the right resources with the right skills. So if you're going to do it in-house, you need people trained and available to do the implementation and be given the right to do that. So that might mean you might have to get a contractor to help with the day-to-day work, to backfill a little bit. Even if you get a contractor or consultant in, you might still need to do that from an operational point of view, because doing this as a project does take some time, and if you don't focus on it, you'll just be wasting time and money, and people will be very unhappy. So there's two sides to it, but I'm a preference of at least getting a consultant in to at least give you advice to start with and a way of going forward. I think you need to make sure that consultant can give you a bit of a plan, a bit of a strategy, and whether you take it or not is depending upon your business.
Nice. Well, we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to pop your contact details back up for the people who are on the call who might want to get in touch with you directly, Darren. Did you want to say a couple of final words before I press the end button?
Look, thank you all. Those questions are really wonderful, really good. As I said, if you have any further questions or comments and want to contact me, here is my details. And I have a small consulting business I do on my own, so happy to help you out there. And Rebecca, thank you very much for your help. And guys, thank you very much for joining in. I really appreciate it. That's it.
No worries. It's been interesting. I've popped the link for our LinkedIn group in the chat. If anyone does think of questions later and they want to get in touch with Darren there, or even just to connect with other speakers, that's available for you to jump onto. So yeah, thank you everyone. And that was really good, Darren. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.